you're thinking about doing a trade show this year, then listen in. Today, in this episode of Start, Scale, Succeed, I'm chatting with Imogen Partridge, artist and illustrator who exhibited for the first time at Top Drawer recently. She will share what she's learned and what she might do differently next time. Imogen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you've very recently gone full time in your business, and going to a trade fair was one of those things on your tick list, your to-do list. But before you went full time in your business, what did you do? What was your industry?
So before that, I was an interior designer, and I did that for nearly 13 years. And yeah, left last January in 2024 to take my illustration further.
And what made you decide that? Why did you first feel? I suppose, and if we're specifically talking about Top Drawer, but why did you feel that a trade fair was right for you, and what made you want to do it now?
So when I left work last year, a lot of what I do is bespoke illustration. I run workshops, and I was ill straight away and very quickly realised that how much of what I do is just me. And I started to think about ways that I could add some slightly more scalable and different options to my business that were less sort of me centric. And wholesale was one of them. And for various reasons, I didn't do it for about a year and eventually did book Top Drawer. It was one of those things that I just really wanted to try. Every time I see people doing trade shows and things like that, or I see people selling their cards or prints or things like that, I just think, I could do that. And I wasn't really sure if I should or not. And it got to the point where I thought, if I don't just do it, I'll never know if I like it. Like, there was all sorts of reasons I thought of not to, but also lots to do it. And so I just thought, if I book something in, particularly, like, rather than just saying, I'm going to start doing this, if I have a deadline, it will make me do it and it will make me get things together. And yeah, that's what happened.
And so for those listening, if they don't know what Top Drawer is, it's a trade fair that is in the UK in January and September, and it's kind of like, I suppose, more to that higher end, not luxury, but in terms of market that you're going to attract. It's greeting cards, homewares, gifting. There's some food there, a lot of interior. So it's very broad. It's a very broad trade fair held at the Olympia twice a year. So it's not massive, but it's not on a small scale either. And what made you decide to go with Top Drawer as that one for your first trade fair experience?
Yeah, interestingly, speaking to some people, it sounds like there's other trade fairs. And for example, Progressive Greetings, which is smaller and a different sort of thing, but it's just greetings cards. And that sounds like a very friendly environment and a nice sort of entry into it. But no, I didn't do that. I asked a lot of people and I talked to people about what they've done in the past and what worked for them. And Top Drawer was one that just a lot of people seem to have a good response from, and it's convenient for me because it's in London. Like Spring Fair, which terrifies me because it's absolutely massive, is in Birmingham, so it's accommodation and things, so for various reasons, but it just made sense for me, I think.
And why did you decide that now was the right time to do it?
I think it was that thing of having a deadline to make me do something. I nearly signed up actually the January I left work. But at that point, I thought, actually, I need any extra money that I've got as a bit of a buffer to, just see how we get on. And I got to the point where I'd thought about it so much and I'd seen other people doing it and I'd thought it looked exciting. I felt like it would give me different opportunities and put me in front of a different audience. And for all of those reasons together, I just thought it would be a business decision. And also because I thought it was something that it would slowly build. So I thought the sooner I can start, I didn't expect greetings cards to be something that suddenly explodes. It was just something that I thought the sooner I can start, the sooner I can start building.
And for people that are listening, greeting cards is just an element of what you do in your business. So like you said, you do the workshops, but you also do wedding stationery. You do a variety of different things. Why, if you can talk about the other products that you do and the other kind of things that you do, but then why you chose greeting cards to start with?
Yeah, so the majority of my work is bespoke illustration, which I do for businesses and private clients. I work with all sorts of different people, like conservation companies, hotels, private clients on house portraits, weddings, things like that, and run workshops, have some online painting as well. So the whole greetings cards was something that had been on my radar for a while, but I didn't like the idea of like packing it all up and spending my time becoming a sort of admin person. And which is why wholesale was quite appealing, because of the fact that there is a lot of that still, but it's larger orders and it's also a form of marketing, really, isn't it? It's like putting yourself out there. And I thought it would just help feed into everything else that I do, and is something that I can scale, which a lot of the other things are more difficult to do that with.
And I was looking at your stories beforehand, and they were, one of the common themes was, I must start doing something, I must start getting ready for top drawer. How did you prepare, and what would you do differently next time at that lead up to doing a trade fair?
Yes, there was a lot of that for a very long time. What did you do to prepare? Not as much as I should have, I think. So I did do some things. I visited the show in September, which was really, really useful. And I talked to lots of people there and made lots of notes and that kind of thing, which was really helpful. Listen to your podcast, your live recording thing. That was really good. I chatted to lots of industry friends, people who had done it in the past. My friend Melissa, who is an illustrator for Western Sketches, her company, had done it a couple of times, I think twice before, and was so helpful, like really generous with the information that she shared. And that was really, really useful to kind of just have different levels of understanding and different perspectives. I eventually collated some ranges, like so last minute, I can't even tell you. It was a terrible idea. But anyway, I just feel like a January trade show, when you've got, like, Christmas is a really busy time for me in my business. And also I have family, and Christmas is busy for everybody, isn't it? And then my son's birthday is on the 29th of December. So it's like a really busy time. And I didn't do as much as I should, and did it really last minute, and I just stressed for months. So you can definitely learn and not do this. But I also, I collated my ranges. I worked out pricing. I researched printers and got that all set up, which was really helpful. They were brilliant. Sorted out my catalogue and my line sheet and things like that. So it was kind of everything that I needed, as well as designing the stand. So I had a thought about that, which my husband helped with, which was really helpful.
And you know how when you were talking to those people at the trade fairs at Top Drawer, and doing that bit of research, what were the kinds of things that stuck out to you most from their advice?
I think generally the overall impact that I got from my visit when I went in September was actually, it was a really good vibe. Like, everyone was so friendly and really generous with their advice, which was really, really helpful. I will caveat, I always said to them, I'm not here to buy anything. Like, if anyone comes to your stand, just drop me immediately, because I didn't want anyone to not be talking to me. But everyone said about how helpful and friendly everybody else was. And that made it feel like a really nice, supportive environment, which I felt helped me sort of picture myself in there. It wasn't like people were sort of cold or didn't feel competitive. And I felt like that was really helpful to just kind of give a nice feeling about it. And I think going into things like that with a good feeling is really helpful. And then it was a lot of practical tips. I think it was just things like the stuff that you wouldn't know to even ask, things like the fact that lighting isn't included in the price and which lighting to choose, so I could have a look at other people's lighting. And like, it was those sort of little practical things that I found really useful, which I wouldn't have got because I wouldn't have known to ask people about.
And so just on that, in terms of the stand setup, because I know this can often take people a lot longer than they think it will. So that logistical side of you setting up, were there things that you learned that you could share from that time?
Yes, I think a lot of logistical things. I mean, so I tried to keep it as basic as possible, like on brand, but simple and not too complicated. Like, I was really bearing in mind that we were setting, my husband thankfully came with me, which was really helpful to have some support. But I wanted it to be an option that I could do it by myself if I needed to. So, I mean, I just had, some shelves. I did paint one wall, and I had a few sort of pictures up, and I had one vinyl sign on the wall. And it was very low key and very simple. But it took us so much longer than we thought. I think in total we were probably there for about 7 hours, because you just don't know some of the things, and you have to, you paint the wall, you have to wait for it to dry, and then you have to paint it again, and then you have to wait for it to dry before you can put anything onto it. Like applying the vinyl, I hadn't done anything like that. Again, thankfully my husband did that bit because he's very precise and I'm very clumsy. Things like that, they're just, you want to do it right. So I think generally I would say allow more time than you need. If there's any scope to kind of do any kind of mock-up at home, that's really good. I didn't do that, but that would be a really good thing to do. Like, if you had shelves, maybe lay them out on the floor and lay out your design so that when you get there, you know what you're going to do. Because I actually did quite a lot of fiddling about with where everything was once we were there. So I just sort of set it all up, the shelves are up and everything. You think, oh, it's just got to get the cards out now. And actually that took me ages. So yeah, and I think it's just having a look at what other people have done in the past is really helpful. But it can also be a bit overwhelming because some of the stands are incredible and they've got huge budgets, or definitely bigger than mine, and they've got teams. So I think it's just making it manageable for you is a really important point.
And from a cost point of view, so people who are listening, and obviously every trade fair will be different, every location will be different. What, if you can share the approximate stand costs that you had to pay? I suppose thinking about, obviously the time it took for you to set up, the time, the travel, all those kind of things. But initially, like the stand cost, how much did it cost you to exhibit?
So I've written it down. The stand itself and associated fees was 2,200, just over £2,200. On top of that, there was lighting, which was about £125, painting the walls, parking. So my stand cost in total for kind of having it set up was £2,420. But on top of that, I had printing, I had to buy stuff to paint the walls, I had some other things to pay for with that, so, and then travel to and from the show. So my total spend was about 2,000, just under £2,900, and that was me doing it with spending as little as I possibly could. And yeah, so I think when you go into it, you think, okay, the stand cost itself that I was contracted into was just over £2,200, but actually it's the additional stuff on top of it that you do need to bear in mind. And depending on what your product is, like mine is cards, my printing cost was under £200. If you had an expensive product and you needed to get those made or produce, there's other factors to consider. So yeah, it's kind of looking at it as a whole and trying to budget for that throughout the year, I think.
I know that you said your stand was simple. It still looked very good. I saw Imogen's stand when we were there, and yes, it was on brand though. You know what I mean? In terms of it was calm, it was simple, but it looked very professional, looked really good. So it's think about what you can get done without spending a fortune, and how great you can get it looking without spending a fortune if you're thinking of it as your first trade show. And what did you do during the show to generate interest to the stand?
So I had little postcards of my work that people could take away, and on the back it had my details and a QR code to my wholesale page on my website. And then I also took some painting. Whenever I do anything like this, I've never done anything quite like this before, but whenever I do anything live, I always try and take some painting with me, even if I'm not actually doing it. I think having it out gives people a connection to what I'm doing and sort of shows that it's me that's creating it and this is how I do it. But also, if there was any downtime, I could do a little bit of painting. And also it created quite a lot of interest, which was really good. And I think one of the things for me being there was, as well as launching wholesale and having a wholesale range to sell, I was interested in talking to people about potential bespoke work as well. So actually having that out was showing people that I could create things, and it was kind of inviting conversation about it, really, which was helpful.
And having that the card with your QR details for someone to take away with them, and from someone that's been to hundreds of trade shows across the world, I will still have those cards, and I'll remember I'll make a little note on them, and I'll remember who it was, and I'll come back to that in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, whenever it is, when I'm ready to buy that type of product or look for someone who does that kind of product again. And you use social media quite well in the build up and during it as well, in terms of your thoughts on the day as well. So just talk a little bit about whether it was intentional or not. It looked good.
Yeah, I mean, partly because it's something to talk about, isn't it? So it's helpful to have some content to talk about. But also partly because it was completely consuming my life. So it was good to share that. I mean, I have seen people in Top Drawer, like when Top Drawer comes around, or like trade shows generally, I feel like there's an influx of my feed is full of it. I imagine yours is as well. And I think, but other people's, there isn't at all, and they don't know anything about it. So it was really interesting. I talked about it beforehand. I generally try and share stuff that is just how I'm feeling. And I talked about it saying, like, the week before, I was like, I'm really scared. I'm so behind. I haven't done anything. And I'm really worried about this. And I had people come to me, say to me, like, me too. Like, we're so behind. We're so unorganized. And it just makes you think, oh, for goodness, okay, it's not just me. And it doesn't help, but it also makes you just feel a little bit more okay. So I think the act of sharing that helps other people and also helps you. But also, I had so much support and encouragement for people, like even before the show, just saying, you can totally do this. It's really lovely. That come from social media, because there's all sorts of negatives that come from it, but also to make it a positive space is really helpful. And then during the show, I wanted to make sure that I was kind of talking about it to just, you never know who's looking or who's searching for Top Drawer, or like scrolling and having a look at who's there, everything like that. So to just make sure that I had things that I was sharing. So I tried to go in like an hour early. It opens an hour before. So I tried to go in an hour early to maybe have a little bit of a look round, also to try and like post something. And then I would usually do a post on my way home just to say about how the day had gone. And again, because people were saying things like, oh, this is so interesting to hear about it. And like, I had no idea what goes into all of these things. And, I don't even know what this is, but I've learning and it's so interesting. Like, people love following along on a story, don't they? I've discovered. And although you're sort of really exhausted at the end of the day, actually it was nice to be able to kind of have these conversations. And then afterwards, I basically just shared a bit about my experience, and that ranged from how I felt about it, like practical things that I'd learned, all sorts of things like that. And I think so many people said to me, like, I've nobody talks about this stuff, and I didn't really realize, and I didn't sort of talk about it because no one was talking about it. I just talked about it because it was relevant. But actually being able to then help other people, and I had so many messages from people who were like, oh, I'm considering doing it, this has been really useful, and maybe ask the odd extra question, and I will definitely be directing them to this podcast. And I'm also writing a blog post about it, which is my job this afternoon, because I think it is really helpful. And I was really grateful to people who helped me, like my friend Melissa, but lots of other people, and like your podcast. Like, there's so many resources out there, but you don't necessarily know where to look or who to ask. So actually being able to kind of generate a conversation, like, it's a really generous space, and the people there are really kind, but also it's outside of that. It's like, who do you ask and where do you go to when you don't know any of this stuff?
And you also shared with me, you got some orders from sharing your stories after.
Yes. Yeah. Which is like, that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
No, it's great that you share with the community, but also it then made you some money.
Yes, yeah, which is a really important point, I think, because I think my husband made fun of me for talking about top drawers so much. I think he replied to my question box saying, "Oh, I didn't realise you entered a trade show," in a very sarcastic way, and I nearly replied to him saying, "Well, actually, I've had these many inquiries just off the back of sharing it on Instagram, this many, orders, and I also had a list of shops that I could get in contact with, because I was sort of saying, like, if there's anything, if you know any shops local to you that you think my work would slot into, like, let me know. I'd love to meet people." And so that's really, really helpful to kind of just crowdsource information, isn't it?
And what was your aim for the trade show?
So I think I went into it thinking of it as a very expensive marketing exercise, and that was like my benchmark of what I was aiming at. I think I thought it would be lovely to get some orders, and I was really, really not expecting it. I didn't think, because I'd never been there before, and I didn't even expect that people would order on the day, which they do. So that felt like a bonus. And I was aware it was a thing, but it did feel like a bonus. But I think my aim was to start my new kind of wholesale arm of my business, and just this was kind of kicking it off as something that I could build on, and also to put myself out there in front of different people for bespoke illustration work as well. So that is something else that I got quite a lot of interest for at the show, was bespoke illustration, which obviously is something that isn't something that people would place an order for there and then. But so it's a big brand awareness exercise, and I actually got so much value from being in a place that nobody did really know anything about me, like Instagram and my workshops, things like that. People choose to be in those places, they choose to follow you. So it was really interesting to have feedback and conversations with people who hadn't come across my work before and hear what they had to say, and it was really useful.
And obviously then you did, as a result, you made sales on the show. But I think that's interesting because some people will have very much a, see, the main aim is to make money, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
And to
yeah,
get orders. But like you say, it was your first show, marketing exercise, but you did get orders at the time that you were there. Did
yes,
you break even? Yeah.
yes. So I think my current,
Tally.
yes, is about £900. But if all of the orders that I've sent out are paid, then it will be about £2,500. That's just from the ones at the show. So then that covers the stand cost, which is fantastic. And I was really not expecting to do that. And then obviously on top of that is any orders that come in additionally, and any bespoke work or anything like that.
Yeah, and the conversations that you've had with more institutions and, like either British tourist institutions or like that kind of thing that you've had that you wouldn't have seen or that would have taken you 6 months of your time to actually try and get in front of.
Absolutely.
But they were able to see you there at the trade show. What would you do differently next time?
I would not do everything quite so last minute. I mean, I say that.
I know.
I'm just that person who does that. But I would try and or maybe just acknowledge that I'm going to do it last minute and I will get it done and not stress, because I was very stressed and anxious for a very long time. But yes, I would say generally leaving myself more time and sort of staggering it a bit and planning it out. And I think going into it knowing a bit more, I would almost find that easier. I mean, also because I have a wholesale range now, but I would find it easier because I would have more understanding and expectation of it. I would reach out to people before the show. I had intended to do that, to sort of reach out to some retailers that I sort of like, or local ones, things like that, like small shops, independents, and just say, I'm going to be at Top Drawer. If you're coming along, this is my stand. You never know. People might come and visit you. They might come to the show because of you. You never really know. And I would probably refine my catalogue a little bit more and make sure that I had all the ranges covered that I wanted. I could see a few gaps, which is fine because I got to the point where I was like, done is better than perfect. I will build on this. But yeah, just some small things. But I think, to be honest, I think going into it, there was just so much that I wouldn't have been able to learn before actually going through it myself.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't too bad in terms of mistakes and things.
And were there any surprising challenges that came up during your time?
I didn't realize how physically exhausting it was going to be. And I think, like what I was saying, like carrying months of like being really anxious and stressed about it, and then having like after the setup, we were exhausted, absolutely knackered. And I'd been busy the week before, obviously, a couple of weeks before prepping and off Christmas, and then coming home and then being like, right, okay, now I've got to do 3 days of this. But on the third day, getting home, I've said this to a few people now, like the only other time I've ever felt that exhausted is actually after having children. Like, as in actually, yes, exactly, having a baby. Slightly less physically uncomfortable, but it was that level of like utter exhaustion. Like, I was really not expecting it, but I guess you're running on adrenaline a bit, aren't you?
Making sure that people have some downtime planned in after.
Yes, yeah. If you can like do things like go to bed early, like eat well, and try and look after yourself as much as possible, as if you're about to like do some kind of endurance race. But yeah, and also how hard it was to eat. Like, it was really difficult to eat. So that's a very small practical thing, but it was me by myself. A couple of times, like I had friends come along or like people visit, but you're very conscious that one time I went to somebody else's stand because they were talking to me about some licensing, and I went to have a look at their stand because they wanted to talk to me about something. And the lovely guy who was across from me, who was a stand holder, took an order for me. And I was only gone for about 5 minutes. Like, so you don't really know. And having like little snacks that are quick to eat and things like that are really helpful throughout the day. And how much admin there was after the show, that I hadn't anticipated that there would be quite as much as there was. And I think that took me 3 days to get rid of the main bulk of it, and then still, I don't know, another week really before I ticked off most of it.
That admin is basically kind of following up with people that came to the show, was it? Or what kind of admin was it?
Yes, yeah, that kind of stuff. I mean, and also for me, I had a lot of spreadsheets. Well, I had some spreadsheets that I didn't have in place to track this stuff. So it was actually doing all of those things. Doing that before would have been really helpful. It would have made it much quicker to do that admin. But yes, it was following up with people. It was placing orders for the orders that I had, which I obviously wanted to prioritize. It was following up with people after the show. And you gave me a really helpful tip of doing like a traffic light system of your orders, of your inquiries and your people who were there. So you could kind of get in touch with them depending on like, they were like, yeah, we definitely want to place an order, but we don't do it at the show. Okay, you can follow up with them. But whereas someone else who's like, we like your work, no offense to that person, but they are kind of less important. The National Trust came by. I was like, right, I'm going to reply to them straight away because that's like a dream client, and it's just sort of prioritizing and making sure that you're keeping on top of it, and also then doing it again. So like now, if any of the orders that I've sent out or anyone that I've been speaking to hasn't come back to me, I'll be following them up and just kind of checking in. I didn't realize how generally this time of year is so busy with all sorts of different trade shows, like in this country and abroad. And so it's been interesting to kind of see that people are out and about a lot and doing different things, and just bearing that in mind as well.
Because there's so many trade shows at this time of year, that they might go to those trade shows, then come back and get everything out and wait and put it all together to then make the decision about what they're going to go forward with. So it's not to lose heart if you're not hearing back from people, because it's just a lot of people out and about and stuff. And what would you say to those thinking about doing a trade show?
So I think before, make a plan and try and spread it out so you don't do a me and be really stressed. Definitely visit the show and talk to people and make notes. See what you like in terms of the stand design. See what you think works well. See what you think is, works for your brand. That's really helpful. Seek out expert advice. So like there's loads of like blogs, podcasts. I know you sent me a really helpful list of like some of yours that talk about it beforehand. Anything that you can do to make yourself feel a little bit more on top of it without being too overwhelmed by too much information. But it's useful to go in with a kind of understanding, like even the way to talk to people, what questions people might ask, stuff like that is really useful. I mean, you'll learn all of that on the day yourself, but just having an awareness of things beforehand and what sort of things are useful to have, like even the fact that you need a way to take an order, like that's really useful to know.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Because I think you had a story that you didn't have a minimum order value set up or something, or you didn't, or your markup, or was there something that you were talking about that you hadn't really thought about? Was it not your markup? It must have been your minimum order value or your.
It was, I'd worked out a minimum order value, but I had written down somewhere how many actual sets of cards that was, but I couldn't find it. And this poor lady, she was helping me like calculate my minimum order. And I was like, I've sent her an email to thank her so much. She had placed an order, so that was lovely. But I sent her an email to thank her for this specifically because I was very grateful that she was understanding. But that was really helpful because that was on the first day and it was one of my early orders, and it meant that I had those numbers for the rest of the time. So it's just making sure that you've got sort of quick responses to questions, and people are really nice and really kind and generous, but also they're really busy. It's like it's a busy day, so actually having any information, even if it's written down, you don't necessarily have to know it in your head, although you very quickly will learn it. It's just helpful to have. And then plan your stand, mocking it up if you can, like draw it out, whatever's useful to you to kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like, and look at all the costs and budget accordingly. Some of this stuff was obviously touched on. Tell people you're going to be there, because I had quite a few people visit me who are nothing to do with any of this, but it was kind of just interesting to get a bit of a buzz around like the stand and things like that. I mean, I don't mean invite everyone but I had some shops that I know people who run them come and visit me. It's not really relevant to them to buy my cards, but it was really nice that they came along.
And also from a optics point of view, people will always are more likely to come on a stand that there's people already on than they are on a quieter stand.
Yeah. And someone actually said to me, like, if you're just chatting to somebody, just every now and again, like point at one of your cards or something, and then people think that they're interested in that, which I don't think I did much of that because I felt a bit silly, but what else? Budgets, lighting and electrics, like just consider anything like that, and booking parking, travel accommodation, things like that in advance. Like the parking thing opened about a month.
The hotels go up quite a lot, very
Yes.
close to the fair.
Yes. And I think all the like logistics in terms of like dropping off and picking up and booking your slots for that was about a month in advance. And thankfully my friend had like given me a heads up to do that quick because their spaces get booked up.
And how good were Top Drawer with their communication about those logistics?
They have like an exhibitor manual and it is incredibly overwhelming. There's a lot of information and it's hard to extrapolate what you need. So I did a lot of reading of that and then going to my friend Melissa and being like, what does this mean? Or like, does this mean I should do this?
Do you know what you could do that actually though, is because I've done it recently with a document, is upload that into AI and ask it to search. So if your kind of main queries about parking, delivery, whatever, you could just say, sift through this.
Yes.
Give me the main points on X, Y, Z.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the whole, it was really good. It was just really comprehensive. And there was somebody to ask. And I did have a call from someone like a couple of weeks before saying like, it's your first time. Like, have you got any questions or anything like that? So yeah, it was all right. And to be honest, when I signed up, something that I really noticed and have spoken to lots of people about was how the Top Drawer sales team are, what's a way to word it without making it sound horrible, a bit intense. And there was a lot of like, if you don't sign this by in the next 2 hours, you're not going to be there, blah, blah, blah. And actually, they didn't sell out completely this year. In January anyway, and they moved some of the stands forward, so they were still looking for people to kind of fill slots. Like, so although your exact spot if you love a spot, that might be a good thing to sign up, but actually generally just don't let them pressure you too much. Make sure that you take your time and you're doing it because it's right for you, not because somebody on the phone is saying if you don't sign this in the next 30 seconds. It didn't feel very nice, that bit. And I think I've spoken to people who sort of say they do it despite that, which is a shame. And then once I'd signed up, it all went very, very quiet for a very long time. And I had a couple of questions that weren't really responded to. And I sent a relatively strongly worded email sort of saying, you badgered me for so long, and now I am actually signed up and I have questions and you're ignoring my responses. But yes, so it's just something to bear in mind. And the other thing that I would say to do is work on your mindset. I feel like there's a lot of people who said to me, that's really brave to do that. I could never do that. Like, you definitely could, but you sort of have to believe in yourself and believe that, like, Top Drawer is sort of a large-ish trade show. There's bigger ones, there's smaller ones. And it's easy to sort of look at everybody else and think, oh my goodness, nobody's going to notice me. Like, how am I going to stand out? There's so many people better than me, or, all of these sorts of negative things. But you have to try and not think all of those things. And then drink lots of water, like, look after yourself, have something that people can take away. Ideally something that would be memorable. Priya had those sari bag business cards, and somebody in a local shop to me came to visit me, and she was like, look what I've just found on someone's stand. I was like, yes, I know who that is, but they're great. She got it out to show me because it's a really cool thing. So just thinking about interesting things, I guess, if you can. Yep, sharing on social media is really good. Arriving early so you can have a little bit of a look around if you're by yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's great, so that you've got the time then to take content of the day that you can use later, because you won't have any time during the day to do it.
Yes, yeah. Taking press features, somebody mentioned that to me. I don't know if it was you, but definitely a couple of people mentioned it to me. And I just had been in a couple of magazines, and so I put them out and people looked at them and asked me about them. So just, it builds your kind of trust and credibility, especially if you haven't been there before. And one thing that I thought of, which I didn't do, was maybe having like a testimonial on display somewhere, like whether it's a vinyl on a wall or like that kind of thing is quite nice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You don't want things to get too busy either, you know what I mean? But it's because then they can get lost. But yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah. And then afterwards, factor in some time to have a rest. That's important. And also, like what we were saying about admin, just plan in some time for admin. And I think it's also a good opportunity to reach out to potential stockists as well. So people that you haven't met there that you think might be a good fit, you could sort of say, look, I've just exhibited a Top Drawer. It's been really good. Like, this is what I've shown. Or it's just kind of a talking point, and you can use it in lots of different ways, I think. Yeah. And the other thing is maybe write up what went well and what didn't, so that if you ever did another one, you could remember it, like, so it was fresh.
Yeah, you're kind of promise to yourself, I won't do this next time, or I will do this next time. Thank you so much for sharing all your top tips for your first trade show at Top Drawer. Where can people find you? How can they see your work, and how can they work with you?
My website is imogenpartridge.com. I'm on Instagram at imogen.partridge. I'm on all sorts of other places, LinkedIn a bit, just Imogen Partridge everywhere, basically. Yeah, and I've got my wholesale range, I've got workshops going on, I've got all sorts of different things, and I've got my online painting with Patreon as well. So if you want to come and say hi, or if you have any questions, very happy to help.
Great. And I will put all the show notes. I will put all those links in the show notes. So thank you so much. And I will be back again next week with another great guest.
Thanks so much for having me.